Hi, this is Cy from MusicRadar, and I'm here with MusicRadar's tech editor, Matt Mullen.
Hi, guys.
We are at the 2025 NAMM show, and we have been pounding the show floor for the last 2 days to find the coolest instruments, bits of studio gear, synths, weird things, and we were going to have a little catch-up and talk about our highlights from the NAMM show 2025. So, NAMM, so if you're watching this and you've never heard of NAMM show before, it is the US's biggest kind of music gear and music making conference.
The world's biggest, I suppose.
Yeah, the world's biggest. So it's kind of, been a bit up and down over the last few years with the pandemic and things. I think the first NAMM I came to was like 2010, so showing my age here.
Yeah, my first one was 4 years ago, so I've not really seen it back in its heyday. So I think it used to be maybe bigger than it is now, but comparatively for me, this is the biggest one I've been to.
Yeah, so this is you, because you've been post-pandemic. This is the first time I've been here since like 2019. And so compared to maybe those ones like 10 years ago where I think you would get lots of big announcements from like synth brands, like big things from Roland and Korg and like Akai and Moog and Sequential and all these big brands that would kind of bring out new synth and things. I would say, to me, this NAMM feels like it's been a little bit more low key than the ones I remember. But that's
odd because to me it feels a bit more like probably the biggest one I've been to.
Yeah.
But I guess that's only because I've been going for 4 years. So over that time, it has bounced back from the pandemic, but still not maybe to the levels that it's seen previously, I guess.
Yeah, and I get the feeling like in our world, like our music technology world, like in that time you've had Super Booth in the over in Berlin, and so this is why I kind of say this is like obviously this is the biggest music making conference in the world, like definitely in terms of like size and scale and like the whole industry. But I feel a little bit in our music tech world, kind of Super Booth has kind of stolen a little bit of what used to be like the shine of NAMM, like which is not to badmouth it while we're here. They're being very nice and letting us use their studios, and we've had a great time. It has been brilliant, but there's still a lot of cool stuff that's been announced. So we wanted to just have a little catch up now and like talk about what the big news stories and releases are that we've found on the show floor. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen some pretty big brands coming back this year that haven't been for a good while. Behringer's back after a whole decade.
Yeah, 10 years since they were last here.
I don't think anyone expected. They're a company that does things their own way and maybe not the most, how should I put it, like cooperative or community-focused company.
They can be interesting in their approach, interesting and controversial at times, but they do make a lot of very cheap gear that a lot of people like, and like, fair play to that. Before we get on to Behringer, I wanted to mention, something you covered in advance of the show, which is kind of one of the most interesting and big bits of news that we've seen this year, which kind of isn't really a product launch or actually something that's really been like new at the show, but that's like the news from Native Instruments and Akai. So can you tell us a bit about like that, Matt?
Yeah, it's kind of totally unexpected, but out of the blue, Native Instruments has announced that they're teaming up with 5 of the biggest brands in music tech, 5 competitors, companies they've historically been competing against in the controller marketplace especially. But they're teaming up on a few different fronts, but mostly to extend NKS compatibility to their competitors' controllers. Now, this is like a kind of control standard that when you have a Native Instruments controller and you open up an NKS compatible plugin, a lot of its parameters will be automatically mapped to your controller. You won't have to fuss about with manual MIDI mapping. So basically their controllers will be able to control, I think, a list of about 1,800 different instruments that previously would only have this kind of compatibility with Native Instruments hardware.
Yeah, so before you'd have like their like machine or machiner as it's meant to be pronounced, and they're like their controller keyboards, and it would mean NKS stuff means basically that all of their software, so like the complete things, the kind of things running on compact, the old massive synths, things like that, would all their effects would run really nicely with like machine hardware or the controllers. And they extended it to like third-party things, so I think there's a lot of third-party synths and plugins that make
collection, Yuhi, some of their stuff.
Yeah, that work really nicely through this NKS stuff. And so the interesting thing about this is that they're expanding that to a lot of these brands. So you've got, I think they mentioned like Korg and Novation.
Korg, Novation, M Audio, Nectar, I think.
And I think Akai are the ones that
Akai's
are
the
really interesting. So so we've seen at the show this year, we've seen some of this NKS stuff running on like Akai's like MPC keys and things like that. And it works really nicely. But the thing that I think is interesting is that like obviously Akai's MPC is the big, always been the big rival to Machine. So like Machine was launched well over a decade ago, kind of as like a modern version on the old Akai MPCs from the 90s, which were...
At that point, it was like the newcomer, the kind of cooler option.
Yeah, because kind of
way.
the MPC was a little bit in the woods then.
Thing.
It was like they were making the controller versions and like people weren't that fussed. Akai has since come back with like the MPC Live and MPC-X, which we really like. And Machine has... It's kind of dropped off a bit in years. I mean, we've always liked the hardware, but we will link to onto this video we did. Me and Cy Blaster talked about the most recent Machine software update, which we weren't.
You were really let down by that one.
Yeah, and so I think as much as this kind of link up with NKS stuff is really interesting and cool, it does raise questions about like what the future of that Native Instruments hardware is going to be.
I mean, there's no question it's good for us, for music makers, and like very good for Akai and Native's partners, but like the question is like what's really in it for Native Instruments. And I guess thinking about it, I guess that they're just banking on selling a lot more software and shifting their focus maybe away from hardware.
It certainly makes me think I would be wary of recommending anyone to buy a Machine.
Yeah, I've seen on Reddit and places like that, a lot of Machine users have looked at this and thought, well, what's in it for us?
What's coming?
Because you can't even access, I don't think you can even access some NKS compatible stuff on Machine that you can now access on an MPC, which is kind of mad.
So maybe that's the way to go. So that's one big story from NAMM. Let's talk Behringer. We mentioned that in the intro. So Behringer are back after 10 years. They've got a few. I mean, Behringer, as a lot of people will be aware, have this habit of announcing loads and loads and loads of things, and it's quite hard sometimes to keep an eye on what actually exists.
It's something they directly addressed in like an Instagram post.
Yeah, they've been
a few weeks
accused
ago.
of kind of creating vaporware, which is stuff that exists on the marketing side but never actually appears. So this has been quite a nice chance to like get our head around what they've actually got. So the three new big things that they've been showing at the show have been the Wave, the LM drum, and the
BX1.
The BX1. So all of these, like in typical Behringer fashion, are based on bits of vintage kit.
And it's kind of very obviously based on bits of vintage kit as well.
Yeah, so
they're not really hiding their influence.
What did you think? What's your opinion of these? We had a little demo earlier. We had a little play.
It's kind of a mixed bag. I think the LM drum especially is a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, as you said to me earlier, these are samples you can get on the internet. They're freely available, and there's still obviously a hardware aspect to it. But
I mean, I totally get the appeal of the Lindrum. Lindrum is a massively classic bit of gear, but compared to like a lot of these Behringer things where the Model D or whatever, the kind of those old Moog synths or like the ARPs or things like that, whatever you think about like the IP behind it and the company or whatever, you totally get the appeal of having those classic analog synths really cheap. When it comes to the Lindrum thing, like I know you've got like the converters and stuff that make it, but again, it's sample based. I whisper it. Don't think the Lindrum is necessarily the best interface in the world anyway. Like I kind of don't really see the appeal there. But that saying that, there's obviously a market for it, and it does sound on the money. The Wave, you were having to play with the Wave earlier. What do you think of that?
I like the Wave a lot more. I mean, it ticks all the kind of bright blue retro boxes. It looks great, but under the hood, it's also a whole lot of synthesizer for $599.
Yeah,
it's like 8 voices. It's got the original factory wavetables from the PPG Wave. You can import your own.
I've always got a soft spot for those old school wavetables. Since personally, I kind of feel I personally stick to like more complex wavetable plugins, like new ones, because I kind of feel you can do those classic sounds. But yeah, like you say, I understand the appeal of that a bit more. And then the third one, their third synth was the
BX1, which was a complete surprise. Yeah. Based on the Yamaha DX1, right? Which is essentially kind of two DX7s mashed together in a very rare bitimbrel synth, I think.
Yeah, which is it's an interesting one. Again, skeptical me, like I kind of feel when it comes to FM synths, there's been some really great FM synths in recent years. Like FM synthesis was a kind of a bit of a obscure thing a few years ago, but you've now got like Korg's Op6, which is brilliant. You've got the Electron's Digitone, which is a like wonderful little FM synth. And I kind of think these have moved FM on a bit more. And also they would like, when I was playing with that new Behringer one, which again I've forgotten the name of, the BX1, and I will forget that the moment I say it. I was playing with it earlier. I kind of think it suffers a little bit from having that like retro interface, which just isn't particularly nice to shape sounds.
It looks like a complete nightmare to program, to be honest. But I think for some people, maybe that is the appeal. That the size of it, the scale of it, the amount of buttons, the amount of graphics.
So basically, what we're saying with these Behringer things is like, if you want old authenticity, you're going to be happy
for a very good price.
But they are authentically vintage for better and worse a bit.
Yeah.
So what else have we got? The other things that we loved at this show. So
I think going from something old to something new, something that really impressed me and that I found to be kind of really genuinely innovative is this new controller from Melbourne Instruments, is it?
Yeah, cool. What's the company?
An Australian manufacturer who I think they've only got 2 products out, which is 2 analog polysynths. I think first was Nina. I think that was my first NAMM.
Which we saw a few years ago.
And second is Delia. But I guess like the USP of these instruments is they've got motorized knobs essentially. So if you switch a patch or you modulate a parameter, the knob is going to rotate by itself. On its own. And you might look at that and think it's a bit of a gimmick, but also I think there's some genuinely useful reasons.
And they've now brought that to a controller, haven't they? So they basically got a little MIDI controller with that whole motorized knob thing. So how does that work? So like you can basically save your patches in like Ableton Live or something like that, and then
you've got 8 of these knobs, 8 little displays below, 8 kind of lovely mechanical keyboardy buttons, and it's made to be plug and play with Ableton. So there's a few different modes, like the mixer mode. It will just instantly, you've got your knobs, which will either be volume or pan. You've got your buttons for mute or solo, and then you see your track names on these little rectangular displays, which, I mean, even that alone would be a kind of nice little useful thing to have.
Yeah, nice.
But, second mode is plug-in mode. So obviously, if you're familiar with Ableton, you'll know that a lot of plugins will have a set of 8 macros, which are often kind of pre-assigned, pre-made. And so you'll open up a plugin, hit a button, and you'll have instant access to those on... You'll have instant access to those on Roto Control's 8 knobs.
Cool.
And then the third mode, MIDI mode, you can use it with external hardware, and obviously assign it yourself and store, I can't remember the exact number, but a whole lot of different assignments on the controller itself. So when you plug it in again, you don't need to
map potentially pretty handy little thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, nice. That sounds cool. I want to give a shout out to Stylophone's new filter, the DFA. So Stylophone, like people probably know them from the kind of stylus controlled synths, the kind of little retro kind of things, but they've really like branched out in recent years, the company, because last year we saw they released a cool little drone synth, like which is kind of Euro rack compatible, and then they followed that up this year with like a really similar looking kind of filter thing, which is, again, it's kind of I think semi-modular, so you can patch it. It's Eurorack compatible, but it's like it's something that like I think I said in our video with them, it's like absolutely right up my street of like I love little compact gritty noise making things like that. It's got like 2 really nice
I found that about the drone synth. They did have a nice like kind of gritty tone to it.
Yeah, and like what I like about that filter is like it's got you can kind of arrange them in parallel or serial, but you've got this nice stereo mode where you can kind of split the 2 filters to do some really cool like little stereo effects. You've got these the kind of gates and triggers, so you can kind of use envelope shaping to like control the cutoff of the filters. You can kind of trigger them to make them almost work like kind of noise gates. So it looks like something that would be really versatile. I think it's going for I think they're aiming for around like $300. So pretty affordable, pretty cheap. It's like small. It's Eurorack mountable desktop. So it's like the kind of thing that it would look great paired with like Volcas and things like that as a nice little kind of desktop effect thing, or as a nice, quite versatile little thing to add to a modular rack. So that's something that I've been really enjoying the show.
They're really cornering a niche in these kind of small, cute, but actually quite powerful instruments and effects, aren't they?
Yeah, so it's cool. That's nice. What else? What's been your other highlights?
Another highlight of mine was from a Chinese manufacturer called Dono, who've been around for a while, but they've sort of only recently come onto our radar.
Yeah, so Dono are kind of like a massive company in the world of they do, I think, a lot of kind of budget-friendly keyboards and electronic drums and guitar products. But it's only in the last couple of years they've done kind of more synth-related things. So I reviewed their first synth product, I think, a couple of years ago, which was it was based on the Roland 303, the TB303, so this little acid synth, and that it kind of looked like something you would use to do your taxes on. So it's a bit of a weird look, but it sounds really great, really on the money, analog, all analog, replication of the 303 with some a few digital touches on there, some nice effects, and a really nice price point.
Yeah.
And so I really like that, and so they've done a couple of things since then, but the latest is
it's the L1, which is in the same vein as that. It's like a recreation of a classic Roland instrument, except this time it's not the 303, it's the SH101.
Yeah, another absolute classic of acid house.
And it's like a single oscillator monosynth, and there's a lot of similarities with the SH101. They weren't saying to me directly it's based on that, but it's pretty obvious.
That's, the 101 being a really classic, really nice synth to learn synthesis on, because it's kind of single, kind of simple oscillator, simple filter, really nice basic subtractive design, but the way the envelopes work is really good at kind of those punchy, acidy sound, isn't it?
And one knob per function as well. So it's sort of if you're trying to learn synthesis, everything's just laid out in front of you.
Yeah,
the workflow.
And so you heard it in action. Does it sound good?
Yeah,
sounds on the
it
money?
sounds great. And there is actually a few little points of difference that make it to me more than just kind of fully authentic clone. There's an extra envelope, so you can use two different envelopes to control filter and pitch, as opposed to the VCA as well.
Yeah.
There's what they call a drone mode, but I think essentially it's just like a hold switch. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Perhaps the coolest thing about it was this detachable keyboard, which you can attach to it, 25 key, I think. So you can buy that separately, or just get it as a desktop module. You can attach that on. You can use it separately as its own MIDI keyboard. What I believe is going to happen is they're going to create more synths that you can obviously buy them, just the module version, and hook the keyboard up, and not have to buy 3 different keyboards.
Nice. So let's talk very quickly about Roland, because Roland are back here at the show for the first time in a few years. I think the big product in our world for them is the V stage, which is kind of quite an interesting, quite high-end sort of stage keyboard thing, which actually sounds really good, and I think feels a bit like they're kind of parking their tanks on Nord's lawn a little bit, almost with the
More than a bit, I think.
the red end cheeks.
It's exactly the same shade of red.
Which is interesting because Nord are here as well with their new piano and their new organ. And actually all of those products, when heard them in action, all sound really good. And there's that kind of realm of the stage performance keyboard and piano thing that feels like there's a lot of really good competition there at the moment, and actually that's maybe not quite as sexy as some of the kind of innovative synth things, but it's been there's a lot going on around that world.
It's a specific niche in the market that Roland hasn't maybe fully entered yet.
And I think it will do well for them. I like it.
Sure.
It's kind of, they've done a lot of the things that based on their Zencore sounds, and they're kind of a lot of the kind of similar sounds packaged into different keyboards, but this has got some modeling things in alongside the Zencore things, which I think puts it into like a slightly broader realm and a bit more interesting. So yeah.
How much kind of tweakability is there in the sounds, or is it a bit like something?
It looks like I haven't had a chance to get properly hands on with it, but it looked like there's quite a lot you can do with the sounds, like with the organs and the pianos and those synth sounds in there. So like for someone who's playing in a kind of regular gigging band or like functions and things like that, it looks like there's quite a lot you could do with it.
Nice.
So what else we got?
Another interesting one for me was Roli.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with them, they're kind of
makers of the Seaboard.
So
they to be fair to Roli, they did a massive amount to kind of popularise MPE, kind of MIDI polyphonic expression. So this really expressive way of playing, and they played a really big role in making that more visible and more popular over the years with their kind of Seaboard pianos. Honestly, we've been a little bit mixed on some of their actual products. Like some of them, I've got a little Seaboard block at home, actually, which is really nice. It's a really nice little controller.
Yeah.
And I love that. So they bought F Expansion a few years back, and company's gone through lots of changes and acquiring things and getting rid of things and things. But part of that is like they have a few software products, like their Equator synth, and then they had like F Expansion strobe and things like that. They've got these really cool sound engines within their library of things they do. Airwave is their big thing now.
Yeah, and Airwave and the new Roli piano, which is kind of sort of very similar to the Lumi keys, but it's like a 49 key MIDI keyboard with polyphonic aftertouch and like per key pitch bend.
Yeah.
That's the new thing. Airwave came out about 2 months ago, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of like the augmented reality thing designed to help.
It comes over your piano, watches your hands, and kind of tracks them in real time.
Yeah. We both said that like actually the technology behind this is quite cool and like quite interesting, but there's a lot of talk from their side on like this is going to completely change the way people learn piano or completely change pianos. I think when you spoke to Tom from Roli, they said that in a few years there's not going to be anything such as a piano without a camera.
These are the kind of claims that they're known to make. They've made these kind of claims in the past.
I am going to go out on a limb and say that 10 years from now there will be pianos that don't have cameras in them.
I won't disagree with you on that.
But still, you've got to love the enthusiasm, and like it is interesting technology, and like I don't think it's quite at a point yet where it's going to like necessarily change how people play or change how people learn or anything. But there is like interesting scope, particularly in the way like you can kind of move your hand for extra kind of modulation.
Yeah, and if you just buy an Airwave on its own, you can use that in conjunction with your regular keyboard to basically add on a dimension of MPE to your non-MPE MIDI keyboard, which is cool. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
But they're also going all in on this tuition angle, because combine the Airwave, the piano, and this I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a Roli AI piano assistant app.
Yeah.
They're calling this the Roli piano system that's supposed to be this game-changing way to learn piano. So you'll be playing and it will be watching you play and supposedly giving you feedback in real time, but it's not quite at the level of sophistication I think that they've promised just yet. But
it's got potential. Maybe, not quite. Maybe. We'll see. So quickly, I wanted to talk about Bitwig. So Bitwig Studio is for those who don't know, it's DAW, originally stemmed out of kind of some shared history with Ableton, and it's kind of like, it looks a little bit like Ableton, but it functions a bit differently now. I've been using Bitwig Studio actually since I reviewed it for Computer Music version 1 over 10 years ago, and I've been using it kind of on and off alongside Ableton Live actually since then, and I absolutely love Bitwig Studio. I think it's a really great bit of software. It's the most creative and kind of flexible and deep DAW for my money, because they've got this kind of built-in modular system. The way the modulators work are fantastic. Anyway, the big news for them this year is that they've just brought out their first hardware device, which we've known for a while that they've got something hardware coming.
And we kind of assumed a controller, right?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of assume maybe kind of a pad controller, maybe a keyboard controller, because normally, the likes of Ableton have got push, obviously, and kind of you get official controllers, and they're often designed for creativity like that. But actually, Bitwig, they've launched Bitwig Connect, which is kind of it's effectively an audio interface. It's a little bit more than an audio interface. it's what theirs has is like the most interesting thing for me is that it's got like DC coupled
CV out.
kind of CV out things which work really nicely with Bitwig. So one thing about Bitwig Studio is that like it's always kind of been really good for merging the worlds of like hardware and software. It's got a very modular friendly design, but also lots of devices that are aimed at like sending CV out and receiving CV. So having an interface like that actually makes a load of sense like to use with it. And you've got one of the nice features about it is that like it's all calibrated so that like you can send like volt per octave to synths and modular gear without much setup, which I think sounds really cool.
Because I've heard, linking Eurorack and the DAW can be pretty.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it with any DC coupled interface, but it can be a bit awkward and a bit annoying. So having, and what Bitwig Connect looks like it does is it kind of makes that a lot easier. I've seen like some response to it saying that like it's kind of lacking, people would like more ins and outs of it, so it's a little kind of small.
Yeah, I was thinking that initially. It may be less than expected.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me a bit like they're launching this as a kind of concept, and hopefully that will lead down the road to like a bigger version. Because like I'd love to see one with more ins and outs and more of those kind of DC coupled.
Well, even them putting the ins and outs in the name as numbers made me think, down the line there's surely going to be a Connect 812 or
one thing I thought was interesting about Bitwig Connect is that like it's got this Bitwig mode that means you can kind of take over Bitwig a bit. I was kind of expecting it to do a few more Bitwig specific things than it does. Like it almost looks as if it's like a Bitwig branded interface that's kind of aimed at anyone, and I was expecting it to be a bit more DAW specific. Whether that's a good or bad thing,
I suppose they've got to hedge their bets a little bit and hope that maybe non-Bitwig users.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely pitching at people who aren't Bitwig users, like which is great, and it means it's useful for other people. Maybe if you're a Bitwig user, you might think like I kind of wish there was something that like was a little bit more focused on.
What are the controls on there? It's got transport, and then it's got this nice large central dial.
Yeah, which can kind of take over devices within the software. So like it can do some cool control things, but like maybe I would have liked to have seen it do a little bit more on that front. But I'm looking forward to like getting our hands on one properly and like properly testing it out because it looks really useful. So that's kind of our highlights at NAMM. Obviously, there's tons and tons and tons of stuff here that we haven't had a chance to touch on, like loads of stuff from Korg, a whole world of modular stuff, whole world of great interfaces and monitors and mics and things that have been released, and we haven't got space to talk about here. If you head to musicradar.com, you'll find our live blog, you'll find all of our coverage, all the news stories that are going up, and there's loads of great things that have come out of NAMM that we haven't had a chance to talk about. Loads of great stuff on the guitar side, loads of great stuff on the drum side. But when it comes to music technology and really cool, exciting things, that's what's really excited us at this NAMM show.
100%.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks a lot, guys. And see you next year.
Yeah, next year.